Yo, class, what up? See, that's me trying to be cool. It never actually works. So I'm just gonna stick to being a geek. Alright, so in the last one, we created some auth stuff. Wait, what did we create? Yeah, the login, yeah. So now let's create a way for our users to be able to create posts. Alright, for that, let's start by creating a new entity. So we can use the terminal, the command line, the TypeORM, but it's not that. It just creates a very simple one. Actually, let me show you. So you can say TypeORM entity create, and we give it a name, post, like that. And now I created this post right here, and it's really simple. We can type this in 5 seconds. So, and also we need to use, actually I forgot one thing. We're using an environment file here, but I forgot to change here in the server. We're still using the port as a kind of static value. So let's change that. So here underneath app, we can say const port equals env, not env, process.env.port. And here we're going to use that port. And let's change these to backticks so we can do this. So $ curly braces port, like that. And that will work exactly the same. This in case maybe in your production you want to have it on a different port, so you change the value inside of here. So that's that. Next thing is let's populate this post model. So it's going to be very similar to the user. So I'm just going to copy everything from the user. I'm going to paste it here just to demonstrate one thing. So let's remove. So starting from the timestamps, just remove everything up to the ID. So all of this will more or less be shared between the two models. So the ID, the timestamps, and then also this to JSON, because later if we want to use some of the utility of class transformer, we want this to be present at the bottom of the model. So what we can do is we can create an abstract class, which all of our entities that use these fields can extend, which makes our code cleaner. So let's do that. So I'm going to go here in entities and create a new entity actually called entity.ts, and here I'm gonna so we're gonna have these fields. So I'm gonna copy the whole user again and paste it in entity. I'm gonna change some things here. So I'm not gonna use this entity decorator, and here we'll say export. I'm gonna export it as the default abstract class, and I'll call this entity entity, and this will extend base entity indeed, but there's actually we don't need entity from TypeORM, so we can remove it here. So this will be fine now. Constructor, we're not gonna have a constructor. I'm gonna keep a constructor on each object. I'll explain why later. It will have an ID, that's fine. The timestamps, that's fine. Let's remove this before insert because this is specific to the user. Keep this to JSON. Remove this white space here. Remove bcrypt, we don't need. Before insert, index, and column. And also the stuff from class validator, we don't need it. So everything is fine here. So save this. And now let's go to the user. And here underneath these imports, let's do a relative import and say import entity from same directory /entity. Now, of course, there's a conflict with entity from TypeORM, so I'm going to rename this and say as. Actually, we can do F2, which renames this as well. So do F2 and say, this is TypeORM entity, so I'll say TO entity, like that. And now it's going to use that here, and there's no naming conflicts. And now this user will extend our entity, so extends entity, which we just created. The constructor will stay the same. We'll remove this ID because that's already present in the entity. We'll also remove the timestamps and remove this to JSON. So now our user model is smaller, and okay, we need to remove as well this class to plain, and also these unused imports here as well. So now our user model is, or entity, is way smaller in code, and also we don't have to repeat that stuff in the post. So let's actually copy this user again and go to post. Actually, I want to change one thing. I'm not going to be exporting other utility stuff from these entities, so I might as well just say here export default class user, and we need to change the imports where we import it. So that will be in the auth routes, Up here, this will be the default export. So we'll just say import user like that. And I think the same thing, not here. Actually, we can delete this folder. And we have here in the server, do we need it? No, actually in the middleware. In the auth middleware here, we're just gonna say import user like that and save. And that should work the same. And now let's do, so, wait, did I paste it? I'm just gonna copy user again, go to paste everything. That's a tongue twister. And here, so for our model, it's gonna be entity, and the name of the table will be posts. I'm gonna rename these to all to post, and then actually this constructor, this will be a lowercase post, and same here will be a partial of post. And here we're not gonna have email, username, and password, so remove all of these. And we're not gonna have this before insert as well. So now let's create the fields that are relevant to posts. So we know every field, every post. Actually, if we look at a post on the actual Reddit, we see that posts are here. For example, here /r/react.js, which signifies the sub, and then /comments. I don't know why it has comments here. I think it's some maybe some really old way of how they coded it, and now they can't change it because it's gonna break stuff. But I'm not gonna have this in our app because it doesn't make sense. And then /this ID here, which is if you go through multiple posts, you realize that this is a base 62 ID, which I'll explain later. And then this is called a slug, which generally speaking, slugs use dashes, but here they use underscores. We're going for a perfect clone, so we're gonna do exactly how they do it. So we need these two things. So this and this, the slug and that ID. So here, we already have a field that is called ID. So I'm gonna call this identifier. So here we'll say add column, and here we'll call this identifier. And this will be of type string. And we could put a comment, for example, here. And oh, why is it doing that? Anyway, and say 7-character ID, just for us to read later. So we're just gonna copy this. So we're gonna have another one here that will be the title of the post. And then we're gonna have another one. And this will be the slug, which we just saw with the underscores and everything. And I'm actually gonna, I'm gonna make these two indexes or indices. Can't believe I said indexes. So this is an index on the identifier and also on the slug, because we're gonna use these two to query the posts by, which will improve the performance, like we said. And I'm gonna add a body. So actually, I'm just gonna copy this one more time. Body. And this will be, this can be null. So we can say here inside of this decorator call, nullable equals true. And I'll also give it a type. So we'll say type. This can be a really long piece of text. So we can give it a type of text, which is the SQL text type, which is just a very long piece of text. Here I'll add another one, and this will be the sub. So I'll call this sub name because we're gonna have sub as well. So this will be the name of the sub that this post belongs to, and that should be it for now. So I'll save this, and let's create some routes for our users to create posts. So inside of the routes folder, we'll create a new file, call it posts.ts, and let's add those routes in the server. So in the server.ts, I'm gonna right here under auth routes, duplicate this and say post routes, and this will be routes/posts. And then we're gonna duplicate which one here. So /API/posts, and this will be the post routes. And here it's complaining because we're not exporting anything yet from the post, so that's fine. Let's just go back to our posts. So let's start by creating an endpoint for creating posts. So here I'll say nfn, and this will be, I'll call it create post, support the post. And this will, as usual, take a request of type request, and you need to import that, and also a response of type response, and import that as well. And here we'll get some stuff from the body. So we'll get, oh, why didn't work? Okay, there we go. And here we'll get the title, the body, and we're gonna get the sub as well from the body, and this will be from the request of body. And the way this is gonna work is I'm gonna actually use the middleware that we created in the last class for this to obtain the user and then attach this post to the user. So actually let's import that. So here at the top we'll say import auth from, go back one level to middleware / auth. And here let's create that router, actually, which reminds me we need to get router from express. And we'll say const router equals router like that, and router dot post to slash, obviously this slash API / posts because we already prefixed that in the server. And here this will be this will have the auth middleware first, and then we'll say create post like this. And of course we need to export the router. So here, now that we have this auth middleware, that means if we get here, that means we do have a user. Otherwise it's going to throw an error from within the middleware. So let's actually get that user. So let's say const user equals response.locals. Remember we added that to the locals.user like that. And here I'm going to do a very simple validation because we don't need to validate the body because that can be nullable. And then the sub, this will actually, I'm just going to keep it like this for now, and then I'll show you later why I'm not validating it. So here we'll say if title.trim equals an empty string, then we're going to return res.status 400.json, and we'll say title, and we'll say title must not be empty. And now we're going to do our try catch block. So here inside of the try, let's create our post. So const post equals, so the idea here, we need to find the sub. So we'll say to do find sub, but we don't have like subs yet, so let's not worry about that right now. We'll create it in a bit. So we'll say const post equals new post. Keep type import for some reason. Here let's pass it an object. So we'll have our title, we have the body, and we'll have the user, which I actually forgot to create. And that's because we need to set a relation between a post on user. So we go back to the documentation of TypeORM. Let's go to relations. Yeah, here. So relations, and we go to, it's a one-to-many relation. And here they give us a good example, which is this user model has many photos, and the photo is many-to-one to a user, which means every photo belongs to one user. So we can just copy some stuff from here. So from the user, let's copy this one-to-many call. Let's go back to our user model, all the way down here, paste it, and import one-to-many from TypeORM. And of course here it's gonna return a post. So this is basically, this is the relation and what it returns as a type. So the type is gonna be a post, and then this is called an inverse relation, which I think from this side is not mandatory, but let's add it anyway. So here let's import our post, and then this will say post, and then it will return post.user, which doesn't exist yet, but we will create it. And here this will be posts, and this will be an array of posts like that. And now if we go to, we'll go to the post model, and actually let's go back to the documentation and copy this from the photo model, and here at the bottom paste it. So this is many-to-one. Let's import that from TypeORM. And by the way, if you're wondering what I'm doing here, I'm clicking Control Space, and then it suggests to me what to do. For example, I click Control Space here. First suggestion is auto import from class from the same directory, and I click Enter. So here, this will return a type of user, and from the user we get user.posts, which is the inverse of the relation. And here we just say user like that. I don't know why the indentation is doing this. Okay, I actually want to add something here as well. If you go back to the documentation, I keep going back to Postman. Right here, you'll see, so we go back to what are relations, and we go to join column. So here by default, it's going to use the name of the model, but I want to be specific and give it, tell it what field to create on the table, and also like which field it references. So if we go back to here, we can use this decorator and say add join column and let it import it. And then here we'll give it some options. The name of the column that it's going to create on this table, I'll call it username. And then I'm going to tell it to the referenced column name is also username. I'll explain later when I show you the table, which will make a bit more sense. And let's copy this and then do the same on the other side for the user. Actually, no, we don't need to do anything here because it's not creating a column. Never mind. Everything is set from the other side. So here, now it's not complaining that we passed it a user. And what's cool about TypeORM, by the way, if you just pass a user like that, it's going to look at the model and it's going to see which field that you need to persist. And in this case, it's the username. And it's going to add that to the table. So we just pass that object and then it will know which field to take from that object and store it on the post table. So it will take care of that for us. Now let's also pass the subname, and that will be the sub that we got from the request body. And now let's say await post.save, and then let's return that post. Return res.json post. And now if we get an error, okay, this is complaint because I forgot to add async here. So let's add async. And if we get an error, I'm just gonna console log that error, and we're gonna return a response with the status of 500, because we've already done validation here. So here, if it fails, then it must be something with our database connection. So here we'll say JSON error, and we'll say something went wrong. All right, save that, and let's see if that's working. So let's check the console. Actually, I forgot that we're not running, but actually I want to show you something. So now that we have our user model, where is it? So our user model is pretty much complete, right? So what we can do is we can create a migration that creates the user model and disable synchronize for a second, because that model is done. So we can make it into a migration, because in production, you're not going to be using synchronize because it's really dangerous. So I'm going to disable synchronize first. Actually, I don't have to. So I'm just going to keep it. What I'm going to do is let's open the terminal and let's say TypeORM Schema Drop, which will drop everything in all the tables. So let's run that. Okay, now it's going to okay, actually it's complaining because it can't read TypeScript files, because with some CLI commands you need to read TypeScript files and you need to run it with tsnode. Luckily, I think they have an example on how to use that. Yeah, using CLI, and then yeah, right here there's this script that you can set up. So let's go back to our code and let's go to the package.json. And here at the bottom, paste that in scripts, but I'm going to change it a bit. So here, I'm not going to say node require tsnode because we already have it installed. I'm just going to say tsnode and then run the CLI where it is inside of the TypeORM dependency. So save that. And now we can say npm run TypeORM, and then we can chain whatever TypeORM CLI command that we want to run. In this case, I want to run schema drop. Now that we have dropped the schema, we can generate a migration based on our current models. But I think I messed up. I don't want it to generate the post table. I'll see actually. Can I comment it? I'm just going to try to comment it and generate that migration. Okay, so let's say npm run TypeORM migration generate. And by the way, there's generate and there's create. And create creates an empty migration for you to populate. But generate, we need to pass it a name. And because this is an npm script, we need to say dash dash to pass any arguments. And here we'll say dash dash name. And I'll call this create dash users dash table. Run that. Okay, there's an error here. Post table. Okay, so actually, yeah, let me, because yeah, it's trying to import post and post doesn't exist because I commented it out. So let's comment out that import and comment out this relation for now. And then let's run the same command. And this time it should work, and it does. So if we go to our migrations folder, we see that we have a migration here, which creates the users table and create the indices, damn it, I did it again. The indices. And then here as well, there's a down where if you want to revert that migration, you revert it and it will drop that table along with the indices. So now we can actually run this migration. We've already dropped our schema, so now we don't have any tables, so we can run this migration. So I can say npm run TypeORM migration run. Hit enter, and there we go. It actually selected from the, that's not important right here. So create table users, and then it created the indices, and then also it inserted a row into migrations table to store what migrations have run and which haven't. So that's cool. So now we can actually run the rest with synchronize, and until we finish those models, we can create migrations for them as well. So let's close this. Let's uncomment these from the user model, so the import and also the relation. And then if we go to the post model, uncomment everything. And now if we run our server, it will create the post table. So npm run dev, run it, and now it creates the post table. And of course it doesn't mess with the users because that hasn't changed. Cool. So let's test out the endpoint. So let's go to Postman, and let me actually register again because we dropped everything. So let's register our John user again, and let's log him in. So login, cool. So now let's go, I'm gonna go to posts. I have everything created already. Let's go to create a request post to /API/posts, and the body will have a title and a body and a sub. So let's run this. Okay, we get something went wrong. Let's check what happened. No value if you identify. Okay, so I forgot that identifier and slug are not null, so we need to straight away create values for them, and we can easily do that. I'm actually gonna grab two links, which I think I already opened them. So this one link, they're both gonna be in the video description. So we can use packages, by the way, for these two things, but when you can use functions like these and you can reduce the number of dependencies that your project has, it's better for your project in the future. So there is this cool solution to this problem that this person suggested to create an ID, which is basically the same that Reddit uses for identifiers right here. It's a base 62 ID, which means it has all lowercase letters and all uppercase letters and numbers. And it creates a massive number of probabilities for it to be unique. So let's grab this function, except for the console log, grab all of this, and I'm going to store it in a helpers file. So in the source, let's create new file, util/helpers.ts. Paste that in, and we need to export this, export function makeId. I'm going to make this capital I, makeId. It's going to take a length. Let's give this a type of number, and the whole function will return a string. We're going to have result. I'm going to change this to let and change these two to const. Even though it doesn't really matter, TypeScript is going to actually compile it and return it to what it was earlier, but it's more readable for us. And this as well is a let, and I think everything should remain the same. Yeah. So those characters are all there. And now I'm going to bring another function, and this is the sluggify function. Thanks to Flavio Silva. Let's copy all of this and go back. I keep going to Postman. Paste this here, and here say export. I'm going to rename this to sluggify. And here it takes a string and a separator, but we know our separator will always be the underscore, so I'm going to remove this. And down here where it connects our string with the separator, I'm going to put a static value of just underscore as a string. So here, this string has to be a string, and this function returns a string. So it just trims it, turns it into lowercase, replaces all the white space and these characters, replaces them with their corresponding regular English ones without all the accents for them to be URL friendly, and then it replaces the empty spaces with with underscores. So let's save this, and now let's go back to our post model, and here at the bottom we're going to do an at before insert call, and here we'll call this I don't know, make id and slug. And inside of here, we'll say this dot identifier equals make ID and import it. And then we're going to give it a length. And I noticed in Reddit, identifiers of posts have a 7. Is it 7 or 6? 1 through. Okay, it's actually 6, but I'm going to make it 7 because it increases the probabilities by orders of magnitude of it being unique. So I'm going to say 7 here. And then this dot slug equals sluggify, make sure it imports it from that helpers, and it will just sluggify this dot title. Save that, and now make sure there's no errors. All right, our server restarted successfully. If we go to Postman and we try to create this now, hit enter, there we go. It actually creates it successfully, and we have a title, a body, we get our user object back, we get the subname, we get an identifier, which is a random base62 ID, we get a slug, which is made from the title. As you notice, it removed the exclamation marks and the white space and made it all lowercase. So our sluggify is working perfectly. And of course, everything is stored in the database if you go and check. So that's post creation done. Before we end this, I want to also add the sub model and attach post to subs and create subs as well. Because post right now is just being attached to a sub that we're sending in our input, and this sub actually doesn't exist in the database. So let's create a new entity. I'm going to copy everything from post and then create a new entity, uppercase s sub.ts, paste that in, and then let's remove everything up to the constructor. And now here, this will be renamed to subs, the name of the table, and the name of the model is sub like that. And here that's sub, and here that's sub, and this is lowercase s. And this will have a name column at column name, and this will be a string. And actually this will be unique across subs, because this is actually what you use in the URL. It's this thing right here. So in this example, React.js. So this will say unique, and that's true. And let's make it an index as well, because it's unique. And we're going to be querying by it. And I'm going to copy this, paste it. This is not going to be unique, and this is going to be the title. And I'm going to repeat this, and we're going to have a description, and this will have a different type. So type of text, and this, text, and this can be nullable. So we'll say nullable, so that's true. And I have two more fields that are similar, so 1 and 2, and I'm gonna remove these texts, and it will be nullable, and these will be strings, and this will be the image. I'm gonna call it URN and not URL, because we're gonna just store the name of the file, and then the URL will be generated in runtime on the fly. Because the domain name can change, where the files are stored can change, so that it always needs to be generated dynamically. And by the way, URN means unique resource name. So this will be the banner. So we'll say banner URN. I'm going to copy something from post. This, because like a post, a sub belongs to a user that created it. This is very much the same. It returns a user. User though returns. Actually, we're not gonna define the inverse of this, because we don't need like a user to fetch their subs. Maybe we'll need it later. If we do, we're gonna add it. So the join column will be username. That's fine. It references username, and then this returns a type of user. I'm also gonna add a one-to-many relation, and this will be to posts. Actually, I need to populate it here. So this will return a type of post, and then the post itself will return post.sub like that, which we need to create in a bit. And then this will say posts, and this will be a type of post array. We already imported post here. Let's remove these unnecessary imports. These I used, I don't know why they're grayed out. So I'm going to remove this. Oh, actually, no, not remove them. It tricked me again. I actually removed them because they're grayed out, but we're using them. Okay, so save this. And let's go to our post. So actually copy this one more time. Oh, actually I copied the wrong thing. Copy this, paste it. It's be many to one. This will return a sub, and then the sub will return sub.posts like that. And let's import the sub model, and then this will join. The join column will be subname that we created earlier, and then this will reference the name on the sub table, and this will be sub. And the type will be sub like that. Save that. I think that should be good. So now let's create a routes file. So here say subs.ts, and let's add those in the server. So here, let's duplicate this and say sub routes, and this will be routes/subs, and then we'll duplicate this as well. So /API/subs, and this will be sub routes. Save that, and let's go, where do we go? Actually, I'm going to close everything because it's getting confusing. So let's go back again, routes, subs. Let's create our handler, const create sub equals async, takes a request of type a request, and a response of type response. And then I do an arrow. Of course, you need to import these, import that and that. And here we'll say this destructor. So we need a name from the input, a title, and a description, even though it can be null. And here we'll say request.body. And we also need the user, because the user has to be authenticated for them to be able to create a post or a sub. So here we'll say this equals res.locals locals.user. And actually I can type this because it doesn't know what it is. So we can say of type user, which we need to import. And we also need to import sub like that, separate these. Let's create our router. So const router equals router. And they say router.post to slash, and this will be the create sub. And we actually will need the auth middleware, so auth like that, and then import it, and also import the router, and then export default router. Save, and let's now create the sub. So we'll do our try catch. So try catch, and here we'll do some validation. So we'll say let errors, actually let's give it a type of any, equals an empty object. And here we need to validate that the name and the title are not empty. So let's import a validator from class validator, which we used in the auth routes. So is empty from class validator. So here we'll say if is empty name, then errors.name equals name must not be empty, and then repeat that and do if is empty title, and here we'll say title with uppercase T must not be empty. And what we need to do now is, even if these are not empty, we're going to check for the name. So we're going to check to find in the database if there's a sub that has this name, then we can't create it because it already has been created. And what we can do is the sub can be entered as a lowercase or uppercase sub, and we need to compare them. We need to bring both to lowercase and compare them. Because if someone creates React.js with uppercase JS and another person tries to create it with lowercase JS, they should not be able to do that. So for this, we're actually going to use something called a query builder. So if you go back to TypeORM, you can check here all of the documentation about the query builder. And it's essentially kind of a way for us to write kind of like a very flexible SQL queries. It's not as flexible as writing a raw query, but it's very close to it. So here they show like so many examples on how to use it. So let's go back. Can I import something from TypeORM? I say import get a repository from TypeORM. And we're going to use that here. Let's try to find that sub. If it exists, we'll say const sub equals await get repository, and we pass it the model, which is the sub model. And here we'll say dot create query builder, and we can give it an alias here. I'll give it an alias of sub, and here we'll say dot where, and then here this is basically raw SQL. So the where statement should compare the name of this sub where we're fetching it. So we'll say sub dot name. If it's equal to, and we'll do colon name, meaning that we're going to pass some variables. So we'll pass those variables here, and the variable of name will be this name that we have up here. But as we want to make both lowercase, we can here say lower and wrap this sub.name to use the lower helper from SQL. And for the name, we're going to give it a value of name.to lowercase. So now we compare both in lowercase, and then here we chain dot get one like that to get just one record. And here we'll say if sub, so if it exists, then we add another error. So we'll say errors dot name, or actually if this is empty, this is going to fail as well. So it's okay that we say here error dot name sub exists already. And now, of course, if we have any errors, we'll say if object dot, oops, let me scroll down. Object dot keys of errors dot length is bigger than 0, then of course, actually what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do 2 try catch blocks. So here I can give the status code for 100. So here I'm just gonna say throw errors like that. So here if we get errors, then they're definitely validation errors. So we'll say return res.status 400.json, and we pass those errors that we received. Otherwise, if there is no errors, then we continue and we proceed into the next try catch block. So here that means everything is valid. So let's just create this sub. So we'll say const sub equals let's say new sub, and then we'll pass it the name, the description, the title, and also the user. And now let's say await sub.save, and then here we'll say return res.json sub. All right. Otherwise, if we get an error, let's console log it so that we can see it. And then let's return res.status 500.json. And here we'll say error, something went wrong. And here at the bottom, okay, everything is fine. We're using the auth middleware, so everything should work. So let's save that. Make sure I save. Okay, there's a problem here. Yeah, it cannot create that table because this table I think has that that sub that doesn't exist. So we're just gonna say delete from posts, and that should let it synchronize perfectly. So if we go back to this terminal and we run that npm run dev again, there we go. So now it successfully added that subs. And by the way, if we go back to the database and we describe posts, you see that now we have this subname, and it's actually, I mean, we've had it already, but now it's a foreign key that references subs.name, and the same thing for the username. It references the users.username. So this will tell the post which field to look by for the relations of user and sub. And the same thing applies for subs. So if we describe subs, we'll see that we have a username here, which refers to users.username. Cool. So let's try to create this sub. So let's go to Postman. I already have those routes, not this. So create a sub. So create a sub is basically a post to /API/subs. And in the body, I put a name of React.js, a title of React space JS, and a description, which can be nullable if you want, but I put React community like that. So let's run this. Cool. So because I'm logged in, it already fetched my user from the cookie, which is John, and it added that user, and we have the description, the name, and the title. And of course, these two other fields are nullable, which is okay, and they're null. And of course, if we try to create it again, that should fail. Cool. And it says sub already exists or exists already. And if I give an empty name, it will say name must not be empty. Cool. So that's working. If I create view.js and say view.js like that and create it, there we go. It creates view.js, and that's obviously the title is React.js, but whatever. You get the vibe. And now, actually now in the posts here, now we can actually do this. So as we get sub from the body, we can fetch that sub. So we can say here const sub equals await sub dot, and we're going to use a different method here, find one or fail, which does exactly that. If it doesn't find that sub, we don't have to raise an error ourselves. It's going to automatically error out. And I'm not doing error handler for this because through the UI that we're going to create, it's going to be pretty much impossible for the user through the UI itself to give the wrong sub. They're only going to have to mess with the API itself to do that, which doesn't happen if they use just the UI. So we don't have to give a proper error message. So here we'll say find one or fail, and we're going to pass it the, so what is it? Yeah, we'll pass it this sub as the name. So name, which will be that sub. And now here we just pass the sub, and it will take from it that sub name. Okay, there's a conflict in naming, so I'm going to rename this to sub record. And actually here we'll say sub record like that. And now remove this to do and save. And now if we go back to Postman to the posts create, And here, when we try to create, let's say React.jss, which doesn't exist, and send this, we get something went wrong. And if we say React.js, which exists, and we send this, there we go, we get our post and the user and the sub that it's attached to. So that's cool. So now it's being created and attached through the foreign key constraint that we added. Cool. So that's the creation of subs and posts. So yeah, that's it for this video. Make sure to like this video and of course subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.